Everly Bush had spent 29 years learning to keep her voice steady. The kind of steady that comes from swallowing pride one spoonful at a time. She worked as a senior project coordinator at Helix Consulting, a sleek tech firm in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. 12-hour days, tight deadlines, and clients who trusted her to fix everything before it broke. At home though, fixing things was never her role. That title belonged to her younger sister, Reagan Bush, who didn't fix much, but was always celebrated for trying. Reagan was 25, a golden-haired whirlwind, who never met a rule she couldn't charm her way around. Their parents, Teresa and Brian Bush, called her the heart of the family. They called Everly the reliable one. That word, reliable, had become a leash. When Reagan announced her engagement to Dalton Barber, the town might as well have declared a holiday. Teresa and Brian went all in. The Bush living room turned into a bridal command center, fabric swatches, champagne bottles, and a whiteboard full of tasks Reagan never touched, but always delegated. Everly, her mother said one Saturday, "Since you're so organized, can you handle the RSVP tracking?" Everly smiled politely. Of course, she didn't mention she'd just finished a 70-hour work week. She didn't mention that Reagan had her own laptop, her own free time, her own endless list of excuses. Still, she said yes. She always did. By March, wedding season had taken over the house. Everly drove up from her apartment in uptown Charlotte every weekend, bringing iced coffees for everyone, even when no one brought her one. Reagan's friends, a glittery crew of self-declared bridesmaids in training, giggled over centerpieces and designer gowns. When Everly suggested a cost-saving vendor, Reagan cut her off with a sweet but poisonous laugh. "Ev, honey, not everything has to be on a budget. Some of us aren't counting pennies." The room erupted in polite laughter. Everly forced a smile. Inside, her chest tightened. She remembered the 2 rent payments she'd quietly covered for Reagan last year, when Dalton was between jobs. But she said nothing. That was the Bush family way. Silence was survival. A week later, during a fitting at Luxe Bridal Boutique, Reagan made her grand reveal. "Okay everyone, time to see the bridesmaid colors." 5 blush pink gowns shimmered under the boutique lights. Soft, romantic, expensive. Then Reagan pointed at one hanger set apart. "And this one," she said, "is for Everly." It was mustard yellow, a dull muddy tone that drained the light from the room. The cut was stiff at the waist, the neckline awkward, the kind of dress that looked wrong even on the mannequin. Everly blinked. "That's different." Reagan beamed. "It suits you. You're more classic, you know, and this shade doesn't clash with your skin tone." The bridesmaids giggled. One whispered, "It's giving librarian energy." Everly's cheeks burned. She nodded, pretending not to notice Dalton smirking behind his fiancée. Later that evening, while they all toasted champagne in celebration, she stood near the boutique window staring at her reflection. Everyone else shimmered in pink. She stood in the middle of them like a warning sign. Humiliation, it had a taste. Metallic, bitter, unforgettable. 2 weekends later, at a family meeting in the Bush dining room, Everly brought a small handmade gift, a personalized wedding planner she'd crafted herself, with tabs for vendors, budgets, and a small note on the inside cover that read, "For the day you've always dreamed of." Reagan flipped through it once, shrugged, and set it aside beside a pile of unopened registry gifts. "Oh thanks, I guess." Everly nodded. The discussion turned to seating charts and the schedule. When Everly offered to coordinate vendor arrivals, her father frowned. "Let Reagan handle that, Eve. You always take over." "This is her wedding." Her mother nodded. "You do tend to make things about you, sweetheart." The air went cold. Everly's voice barely held. "I was just trying to help." Reagan smiled without looking up. "We know, but not everything needs your input." Laughter again, that delicate, deadly laughter. That night, Everly stayed later than planned, helping her mother clean up after everyone left. As she packed away dishes, she overheard voices drifting from the front porch. Her parents and Reagan. "She's jealous." Reagan whispered. "Always has been." Her mother sighed. "It's sad really. She's got a good job, but no man, no excitement. This wedding just reminds her of that." Her father's voice came next, low and dismissive. "Let her help with something small, make her feel included. But don't let her ruin the mood." Everly froze behind the doorway, her hands trembling around a plate. For a moment, she thought of walking out and confronting them. But she didn't. Instead, she placed the last glass into the cabinet, closed the door quietly, and walked out of the house without saying goodbye. On her drive home down Interstate 77, city lights blurred through tears. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, jaw locked. They'd reduced her entire life, her discipline, her sacrifices, into a single word: jealous. The same word that would follow her in whispers, family chats and cousins' group texts for weeks to come. But what they didn't know was that humiliation, once it burns deep enough, becomes something stronger, colder. And Everly Bush was done burning. The next morning, sunlight slipped through Everly's blinds, but she didn't rise with her usual discipline. Her alarm buzzed 3 times before she reached out to silence it. She sat in bed, the same words replaying in her head like a broken loop. She's jealous. Always has been. By the time she reached her office at Helix Consulting, she looked composed, but her thoughts weren't in the spreadsheets on her monitor. She'd spent years building systems for clients who called her brilliant, dependable, a natural leader. Yet the people who raised her saw only resentment where there was restraint. Her phone vibrated at noon, a text from her mother. Mom, Reagan's having another bridal luncheon next weekend. Please be supportive this time. Mom, and wear something cheerful. You looked gloomy last time. Everly stared at the screen. A part of her wanted to delete the message, but she typed back, Everly, sure, I'll be there. Because that's what good daughters do. They show up, even when it hurts. That Saturday, the Carolina Oaks Country Club gleamed under the spring sun, pastel balloons, linen tablecloths, and a custom ice sculpture shaped like a wedding ring. Everly arrived on time in a cream blouse and pleated skirt, modest but neat. She found Reagan surrounded by her friends, giggling over cocktails, snapping pictures for Instagram. Reagan's fiancé, Dalton Barber, stood nearby, playing the perfect Southern gentleman, laughing on cue. When Reagan spotted her, she tilted her head with that practiced smile. Eve, you made it. I was worried you'd skip again. Why would I? Everly said softly. Oh, you know. Reagan leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for nearby ears to catch. Because of how sensitive you've been lately. Laughter rippled from the group. Everly's cheeks flushed, but she smiled tightly. Well, I'm here now. The event unfolded like every other Reagan talking. Her friends fawning, her parents watching proudly. At one point, during a round of toasts, Dalton raised his glass to the most beautiful woman in the room, and her patience with family drama. The table erupted in laughter. Even Teresa giggled behind her napkin. Everly froze. Her hand tightened around her water glass. She forced her face to stay still, every muscle under control. Reagan leaned in, mock whispering. He means it as a joke, Ave. Don't get all serious again. Her throat ached, but she said nothing. By dessert, the laughter still hummed around her like a swarm. After the luncheon, she helped her mother gather the leftover favors, small jars of rose-scented candles. You were quiet today, Teresa said, not looking up. Everly kept her voice calm. Sometimes it's better that way. Her mother sighed. You know, if you just lighten up, people wouldn't take things so personally. Reagan's under a lot of stress. The least you can do is not make things harder. By existing? Everly asked quietly. Teresa blinked. What was that? Nothing. Everly said, and handed her another candle box. Nia's swat. 2 weeks later came the final family planning meeting before the wedding. The Bush house buzzed with excitement. Reagan's bridesmaids were all there, sipping wine, their laughter echoing through the living room. Everly arrived on time, as always, clutching a folder of spreadsheets, vendor timelines, contact lists, budgets. Perfect. Reagan said sweetly. You can help. Actually. No. Let's not make this another Everly production. Her friends laughed. I just thought. Her father cut her off. Sweetheart, let your sister shine. You've had your turn. Everly blinked. My turn. When was that? Exactly. No one answered. Reagan clicked open her laptop. Now for dresses. Everyone will wear blush pink, except Everly. She's got the mustard one. It photographs differently, but she'll blend somewhere in the back. Her friends laughed again, louder this time. And Reagan continued. I decided to skip having her in the bridal photos, just family portraits. No offense, Ev, but it's all about symmetry. Everly stared at her. Symmetry. Reagan smirked. You're taller than the others. It throws off the line. Her mother nodded approvingly. That's practical, actually. Something inside Everly cracked. Not loudly, just a clean, silent break. Later that evening, she stepped outside for air. The voices drifted through the open window behind her. She's sulking again, Reagan said. She always does this. Teresa replied. Can't stand not being the center. Brian's voice came next, tired and dismissive. She'll get over it. She always does. Everly's hands shook. She looked up at the night sky. The stars blurred by tears. She refused to let fall. She'll get over it. That line played again and again, until it hardened into something sharp. By the time she drove home, humiliation had turned into decision. They wanted her small, forgettable, ashamed. But she'd spent a lifetime covering their bills, their messes, their silence. And now, they were about to learn what it meant when the quiet one finally stopped paying. Monday arrived gray and heavy, the kind of morning when the air itself felt tired. Everly Bush woke before dawn, not from her alarm, but from the weight of unfinished words pressing on her chest. She made her coffee strong, black and silent, the way she preferred her mornings. The city outside her window glimmered with rain-slick rooftops and the faraway hum of traffic. She took a slow sip, staring at her phone. 6 missed calls, 3 from her mother, 2 from her father, 1 from Reagan, and a text that made her laugh, bitter and quiet. Mom, we need to talk about the wedding gift. Reagan says you're giving $5,000 toward the honeymoon. That's settled, right? Everly set her cup down. Steam curled upward, ghostly. She read the line again, slower this time, as if repetition might make it make sense. 5,000. Toward a wedding she was banned from. By the time she got to work at Helix Consulting, her pulse had steadied, the way a storm steadies before it breaks. Her team was running final checks for a corporate rollout. But while her fingers moved across her keyboard, her mind was already drafting a different kind of spreadsheet, one no one else would ever see. At noon she called her mother. Mom. She began evenly. I never agreed to give Reagan $5,000. Well, she's counting on it. Teresa replied briskly. You make good money. It's the least you can do after the stress you've caused. Everly exhaled, long and slow. Stress. You know what I mean, Teresa continued. You could have just apologized. But no, you had to turn everything into drama. This is your sister's moment, be gracious. Everly's voice went cold. I already paid 3 years of phone bills, the family streaming accounts, and the cloud storage you all use. I've done enough. A pause. Then her mother snapped. Don't be petty. That was it. The quiet click of a switch inside her. That night, Everly spread every bill across her kitchen table. Invoices, debit records, subscription renewals. The family's digital footprints lined up like confessions. $1,200 a year for the phone plan. $800 for streaming services. $2,000 for shared storage and utilities she hadn't used. Year after year, she'd covered it all, quietly, dutifully, believing it kept the peace. She opened her laptop and began canceling. One by one. The phone plan, gone. The shared Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, terminated. The family's cloud storage, wiped clean of her credit card. For each confirmation email, she felt something strange bloom inside her, not guilt, not anger. Something cleaner. Liberation. Then she opened a new browser tab. Typed. Best solo resorts in the Maldives. The photos glowed back at her like postcards from another life. Turquoise lagoons. Overwater villas. Hammocks swinging above white sand. She checked her savings. Over $30,000 between her emergency fund and travel account. She'd built it penny by penny. A quiet reward system for years of self-denial.
Yee!
She booked a 2-week luxury retreat at Kuramathi Island Resort, departing 3 days before Reagan's wedding. Total cost, $8,000. The exact amount she'd budgeted for bridesmaid expenses, gifts, and that so-called honeymoon contribution. She hit confirm. Her screen flashed booking successful. And she whispered the words like a vow. They said I was jealous of the bride, so I spent her wedding fund in the Maldives. The next day, she started setting her life in order. She told her boss, Kelvin Monroe, about taking remote work time. He didn't hesitate. You've earned it, he said. Don't check in if you don't want to. The team's got this. She smiled for the first time in weeks. That evening, she called her best friend, Carly Sims, and told her everything. The favoritism, the ban, the lies, the humiliation. Carly didn't interrupt, just listened, then said softly, Good, Let them see what it looks like when you stop shrinking to fit their story. Everly left her apartment keys with Carly for safekeeping. If anyone shows up looking for me, she said, tell them I'm traveling. Where to? Carly asked, smiling. Everly grinned faintly. Somewhere with no Bush family drama, somewhere with sun. 2 days before departure, Reagan posted another countdown photo online, her manicured hand holding champagne, captioned 3 days until forever. Some people wish they were me. I don't blame them. Everly scrolled past it, emotionless. She spent that night packing swimsuits, linen dresses, 2 paperbacks, her work laptop, and 1 leather-bound journal. As she zipped the suitcase, she felt light, not happy, exactly, but free. Before sleeping, she sent one final text to the family group chat. I won't be apologizing. I also won't be attending. Enjoy the wedding. Then she blocked every number attached to that thread. Next morning, her mother called in panic. Her father too. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked out of her apartment, suitcase rolling behind her, and inhaled the crisp Carolina air. The sky stretched clear and endless, a rare, perfect blue. She smiled. In 3 days, her family would toast to a wedding they said she wasn't worthy of. And at that exact moment, she'd be sipping coconut water under a Maldivian sunrise, paid for with the money they thought they controlled. The humiliation they'd built for her was about to turn into their own lesson. They'd written her out of their story, so she was writing her own. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and blistering in Charlotte, but half a world away, the sun was already rising over an ocean, so clear it looked unreal. Everly Bush stood barefoot on the balcony of her villa at Kuramathi Island Resort, her coffee steaming in the salt-tinged air. The turquoise water stretched endlessly before her, waves whispering against the stilts of her suite. It was early, the kind of early when the world hasn't yet decided who it's going to forgive. She closed her eyes, breathing deep. At that exact moment, across the Atlantic, Teresa and Brian Bush were in full panic. Nisa, the Bush house buzzed with chaos. Bridesmaids darted from room to room. The photographer was late. Reagan was having a meltdown over her curls, not holding in the humidity, and Everly, missing. No calls answered, no texts returned. Her mother had already left 3 voicemails, each sharper than the last. Everly, stop being dramatic, you're making a scene. Everly, at least tell us you're okay. Everly, this is your sister's day, don't ruin it. Her father tried to stay calm, straightening Dalton's tie, muttering under his breath, she'll show up, she always does. But as guests began arriving at the Rosewood Country Chapel, whispers filled the air. Where's the sister? Didn't they have a falling out? I heard she refused to come unless she was maid of honor. Reagan clenched her bouquet tighter. She's doing this on purpose. Her mother gave a tight smile. Just focus on walking down the aisle, sweetheart. People will forget, but they wouldn't. People never forget an empty chair in the front row. Nisa, thousands of miles away, Everly wasn't thinking about the empty chair. She was thinking about sunlight, warm and golden, spreading across her skin like an apology the world finally remembered to send. She slipped into a loose linen dress, hair undone, face bare. At breakfast, the waiter greeted her with a bright smile. First time in the Maldives, she smiled back. First time putting myself first. She took her meal, mango slices, yogurt, coffee, to a small table overlooking the water. The air smelled of salt and fresh beginnings. Her phone resting beside her plate, lit up with dozens of missed calls. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened Instagram. A blank story screen blinked back at her. She tilted her camera toward the horizon. A perfect sweep of turquoise water. The caption came easily, finally putting myself first. She hit post. Back in Charlotte, the first alert hit the family group chat 15 minutes before Reagan walked down the aisle. Cousin Janelle, wait, is that Everly in the Maldives? Aunt Iris, didn't y'all say she had a work emergency? Uncle Tim, that water looks expensive. Reagan's phone buzzed non-stop on the makeup table. She tried to ignore it, but her maid of honor whispered, Ray, you might want to see this. Reagan snatched the phone. The photo filled the screen. Everly, barefoot, sun-drenched, serene, the ocean glittering behind her like a diamond spilled open. Her jaw tightened. She didn't. Oh, she did, the bridesmaid murmured. Within minutes, The whispers spread. Guests at the ceremony were scrolling their feeds. The florist's assistant gasped aloud. By the time the music started, half the room already knew. The missing sister wasn't home crying. She was living her best revenge under a Maldivian sunrise. Mayan Swen. Teresa caught wind of it. She nearly dropped her clutch. Brian, she hissed. She's in the Maldives. Brian frowned, half whispering. That's impossible. She wouldn't. Look, she shoved the phone toward him. Everly's post gleamed back at them, calm and confident. The caption sliced through them both. Finally putting myself first. The color drained from her mother's face. Meanwhile, guests murmured all around them. Guess she found her happy ending before the bride did. Who bans their own sister and still takes her money? Yikes, Dalton overheard. His smile faltered. The day that was supposed to be perfect had sprouted cracks that no bouquet could cover. By the reception, Reagan's fury was barely contained. Every time a guest mentioned Everly's name, she snapped. Can everyone stop talking about her? It's my day. But no one stopped. Because scandal has gravity, and this one pulled everyone in. Later that night, as the couple cut their towering cake, Reagan's maid of honor whispered again. You're trending on local hashtags. Reagan froze mid-smile. What? Her friend turned her phone around. #sister in the Maldives #wedding, gone quiet #golden child. No more. Each tag linked back to Everly's photo. The barefoot sister under the Maldivian sun. The audience applauded the cake cutting, but the laughter that followed wasn't for Reagan anymore. It was for the irony. And humiliation? It now sat neatly at the head table, sipping champagne with the bride. At that same moment across the ocean, Everly sat under a canopy of stars. She'd just finished dinner, grilled snapper, coconut rice, and a quiet kind of joy she hadn't tasted in years. Her phone buzzed again, dozens of notifications lighting up her screen, missed calls, DMs, comments. She scrolled through a few. Some were cruel. Wow, petty much. Who goes to paradise out of spite? But others were different. You're my hero. Finally someone who stood up for herself. Teach me how to say no with that kind of grace. Everly smiled faintly. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The world could interpret it however it wanted. She knew the truth. Her silence wasn't spite. It was survival. And for the first time, she didn't owe anyone an explanation. My morning while Reagan's reception flowers wilted in the Carolina heat, Everly stood ankle-deep in crystal water, letting the tide wash over her toes. The ocean whispered softly around her ankles, gentle, constant, forgiving. She realized that humiliation doesn't always end with shouting matches or revenge speeches. Sometimes it ends with a single decision, to stop showing up for people who never notice when you're gone. Carolyn lingered, torn. Her eyes flicked between Emma helping a kindergartner reach the cookie tray and Jake proudly showing off his costume. Something softened in her expression. For the first time, she seemed to see what was in front of her children thriving without the crutch of material showmanship. They worked so hard, she whispered. Yes, Saywar said firmly. And that's worth more than any gift. Carolyn touched her daughter's arm lightly, then turned to follow Wallace out the door. The hush in the cafeteria lifted. Parents began murmuring again, but now their voices carried admiration instead of judgment. One mother leaned in to Saywar said quietly. It's refreshing to see someone set limits. We drown in stuff every year. For the first time, humiliation had shifted outward. It was Tessa who had stormed out under watchful eyes. It was Wallace and Carolyn who left unsettled, their certainty fractured, and it was Saywar who stood tall. Her children at her side, pride restored. Mass. That night, as snow thickened outside, Saywar sat with Mateo at their dining table. She laid 2 fresh spreadsheets between them. One, labeled Reclaiming, listed everything she had cut. The other labeled Add Back, glowed with possibility. Emma's swimming lessons. The furnace repair. Mateo's certification program. Her husband's hand found hers. So what comes next? He asked. She looked at the papers, then at her children laughing in the next room. Next, she said, we live for us. But she knew deep down, one more storm was coming, and she was ready. 6 months passed. The Wisconsin snow melted into spring, then into the heat of July. Saywar Blackwell knelt in the backyard garden, guiding Emma's small hands as she patted soil around a tomato seedling. Jake dug furrows with a plastic spade, his tongue caught between his teeth in fierce concentration. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh grass. "Careful with that one," Sae told Emma, brushing dirt from her fingers. "The stems are fragile." Emma nodded solemnly, the copper streaks in her hair catching sunlight. "I'll take care of it, Mom." Life in the Blackwell household had changed. The house felt lighter, somehow, rooms no longer carrying the weight of hidden bills, ceilings no longer pressing down with silent obligations. The constant vibration of family demands had gone quiet. No surprise charges. No begging calls. Just space to breathe. Mateo was studying again, taking night classes at Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, working toward his paramedic certification. The pay raise would come soon, but already his eyes gleamed brighter when he came home, his textbooks tucked under his arm, his pride restored. Emma no longer asked if they were poor. She dove into swimming lessons twice a week at the YMCA, her kicks growing stronger, her laugh echoing across the chlorinated pool. Jake built Lego fortresses across the living room carpet, crowing with victory when he toppled them in mock battles. The spreadsheet Sae once called reclaiming had given birth to a new one. No guilt budget. Each dollar now had a place, not stolen, not demanded but invested into their own lives. And yet the wider family stormed. Tessa had cut Sae from her contact list entirely. Carolyn, wounded and stubborn, called only when she felt brave enough, her tone stiff with unspoken reproach. Wallace, too proud to admit his defeat, said little at all. But rumors spread like wildfire. Aunt Beverly called one night, her voice dripping with false concern. "Your mother says you're having financial troubles, dear. Do you need help?" Uncle Steve wrote an email. "We heard about the breakdown. Everything okay with you and Mateo?" Sae's cheeks had burned, realizing her own parents were poisoning the well with whispers. But then came a surprise. A message from Aunt Joanne. "Good for you, Sae. I did the same thing with my son last year. Had to stop the bleeding. Don't let them drag you back in." A cousin sent a thumbs up. Another relative called her brave. The ripple effect spread, and slowly Carolyn and Wallace began to show cracks. Milas. The first sign came on a Saturday afternoon in June. Carolyn called on her own line, no longer paid by Sae. Her voice was hesitant. "Would the children like to go fishing with Grandpa next weekend?" "Just us. No cousins." Saris hesitated, the silence stretching long. Then she glanced at Emma and Jake, who were building a tower of blocks in the corner. Their faces brightened at the word fishing. "Yes," she said finally. "But only if you come on time, and no gifts." The pause on the other end was heavy, but Carolyn agreed. Milas.
Hand.
The second sign came at the doorstep, 6 months to the day since Christmas. Carolyn arrived holding a small gift bag. Sae's shoulders tensed instantly, ready for another breach. "I know we said no gifts," Carolyn said softly, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "But I found this in the attic." She held out Emma's baby book, edges frayed but pages intact. "I thought you might want it." It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't tickets. It wasn't a glossy box with a price tag designed to impress. It was simple. It was thoughtful. Sae studied her mother's face, searching for mockery. For once there was none. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The words felt strange in her mouth, like a new language. Inside the house was modest but warm, home in a way the Stone estate had never been. Carolyn looked around at the children's laughter, at Mateo sitting at the dining table with his textbooks. Something softened in her expression. Instead, she traveled again. Iceland this time, her winter coat trading places with swimsuits. She walked under northern lights and thought about all the times she'd begged for approval from people who couldn't see her worth. Now, she didn't need them to. Her peace was no longer something she had to earn. It was hers, quiet, radiant, and completely paid for. Minor final narration, her voice would have carried like a soft wind through the end credits. "They said I was jealous of the bride. Maybe I was jealous of how easily she was loved. But love without respect isn't worth a thing. So I stopped chasing it, and the day I did, I found something better than their approval. I found peace." The camera would fade on her walking through a field of snow, phone tucked away, a smile curling on her lips. The kind that comes when the story finally turns in your favor.